Attic Studio Productions presents Shadows of Remorse, a Skull Hunter book series story. Written by S. Michael Lear, copyright 2017. Shadows of Remorse, Part 1. Sarah lay in bed, the soft contours of her pillow muffling the world outside. But the world she wanted to mute most of all was the world within the walls of her new house, where the piercing cries of her son, Ben, shattered the calm of the night. "He's screaming again," she mumbled, burying her head deeper into the comforting embrace of her pillow. Carl, half asleep, groaned and turned toward her. "So, take care of it," he muttered, his words barely escaping the edges of his own dreams. "I did it last night," she retorted, her voice laced with frustration. "It's your turn." His annoyance growing, Carl pushed aside the bedsheets with a grunt and sat up wearily. "Why the hell is he screaming like this every night?" "You know what it's like in a new house," she answered, her voice tinged with a mixture of weariness and exasperation. "Well, you need to take him to a doctor or something," Carl snapped, his patience wearing thin. "I need my sleep, and I can't be getting up in the middle of the night to shut up your kid." Sarah turned over in bed, anger flaring in her eyes. "My kid?" Carl realized his words were harsher than intended. He sighed and tried to smooth things over. "You know what I mean." Sarah's frustration deepened, and her voice quivered with emotion. "When you asked me to marry you, you said that you wanted us to be a family. I thought that meant my son would be your son." "It did. It does," Carl murmured, rubbing his hand across his face to brush away the sleep. "Look, I'm tired. You're tired. And these late nights are getting to both of us. You go back to sleep, and I'll take care of it." Carl leaned over, a small smile forming on his lips as he gently kissed his wife's forehead. She rolled over and nestled back into bed, the soft rhythm of her breathing revealing that she was quickly succumbing to sleep again. Carl sat there for a moment, his gaze lingering on her peaceful expression. As her breathing deepened, he silently got up and left the room. He walked down the dimly lit hallway, the shadows casting an air of uncertainty around him. His face, previously softened by affection, now bore a dark and brooding expression. His fists clenched with tension. He reached Ben's room. He paused for a second, his emotions warring within him before he deliberately banged on the door and then flung it open, denting the wall in the process. Turning on the light, he surveyed the room, his eyes landing on the trembling figure huddled in the corner. The boy, Ben, was curled up tightly, a sheet pulled over his eyes, as if he hoped it would shield him from the world. Sweat streamed down his face, evidence of his relentless screams and the overwhelming fear that had taken hold of him. "Look, you little—" Carl's voice was tinged with anger, his face turning red with frustration. "You'd better shut the hell up, or I'm gonna make your life miserable." Tears welled up in Ben's eyes as he tried to speak. "But there's something in my room." "Are you sassing me, boy?" Carl advanced menacingly, causing Ben to recoil further into the corner. "Damn it, I should have known better than to marry a woman with a kid, especially an idiot like you. Now I don't want to hear another word out of you. Do you understand me?" Ben, his voice quivering, nodded in response, his gaze shifting back and forth in panic. "Good." Carl growled, a bitter sneer on his lips. He turned to leave, but froze when he heard Ben's pleading voice again. "Please don't turn off the light. Please!" Ben's voice was desperate, vulnerable. Carl turned, a twisted smile forming on his face. "Scared of the dark, are you?" he taunted, his gaze fixated on the trembling child before him. He reached for the light switch, flipping it off and on in quick succession. "What's the matter, scared?" His voice took on a mocking tone as he repeated the action, enjoying the boy's evident distress. "Stupid kid!" Carl's scornful laughter mingled with the darkness as he flipped the switch one last time and then turned it off for good. Just as the room plunged into darkness, he screamed out, "No, oh, oh, oh!" Inside the room, Ben sat frozen, his heart racing as the room plunged into darkness. He could hear the banging sounds, the chaos from the other side of the room, and then silence. The door flung open, the light returned, and at that moment he saw his mother's terrified face. "What's going on?" she cried out, rushing to his side and embracing him tightly. Her voice was laced with fear and worry. She looked into his eyes, searching for answers. "Are you okay?" Ben's voice trembled as he tried to speak, his whole body shaking uncontrollably. His mother asked, "Where is Carl?" her voice shaking with dread. Ben raised a trembling arm, pointing towards the slowly closing bedroom door. Sarah turned her head, her gaze locking onto the door, and then she saw it. The lifeless, mangled body of Carl slumped against the floor. Shadows of Remorse, Part 2. Vargo cherished Sunday mornings, a time of quietude and serenity. The bustling masses congregating for their chosen places of worship were like tightly stacked logs, leaving the streets surprisingly tranquil. Even in Lawrence City, typically teeming with humanity, Sundays provided a rare opportunity to walk the avenues and inhale without being swept along. The reluctance to engage in religious observances wasn't rooted in disbelief in an afterlife. That belief was solid. Instead, it was a consequence of dealing with the afterlife on a daily basis, a job that was both a vocation and a curse. The man behind this unique perspective was Rick Vargo, a private investigator of a different breed. He didn't track unfaithful spouses to sordid dens, violating the very commandments they upheld. No, his realm was the thin veil dividing the living from what lay beyond. He witnessed what most saw only in the realm of nightmares, apparitions, specters, poltergeists, and they were more an annoyance than anything. But beyond the familiar shades of departed loved ones lurked beings intent on causing harm. They tore at the souls of their victims, relishing the destruction they wrought. These were the shadows Vargo chased, the malefactors subject only to the laws of the cosmos, a burden he bore. On one such Sunday morning, Vargo found himself seated at Thelo's Café, a discreet haven nestled in the south side near Dearborn. Here, conversations never transcended whispers, and privacy was revered. As Vargo sipped his customary black coffee with a hint of a kick, the serene atmosphere was shattered by an intrusive voice. "Look who's here!" Turning his gaze, he spotted two figures in long black coats, their presence a stark contrast to the cafe's muted ambiance. One was all too familiar. Detective Sergeant Brogan of the 21st District Police. Brogan, an Irishman of imposing build, wore a perpetual scowl that matched his abrasive personality. Their history was characterized by clashes, a fact that was evident in the resentful stare Brogan directed at Vargo. The other figure was a stranger, accompanying Brogan as they approached Vargo's table. "Ed," Brogan addressed his companion, "you remember that filth you scrape off your shoes? This is the guy who probably put it there." "If you're attempting to charm me, Brogan, it's failing," Vargo retorted. Brogan slammed his large fist on the table. "Listen here, you waste of air. If it were up to me, you wouldn't be contaminating decent folks with your presence. I'm only here because the chief ordered it, and the only reason I'm not throttling you is the cost of burying your scrawny body." Spare the sweet talk for the new recruit, Brogan. Spit it out if you've got something to say, or step aside and let me enjoy my coffee." "Very well," Brogan sneered. "Why the chief wants to involve himself with trash like you is beyond me. Nevertheless, he's instructed me to pick you up for a crime scene investigation." Vargo had a history with Chief Hogan. He had assisted Hogan's late wife in finding her way to the afterlife, earning the chief's gratitude. Hogan was a man of measured speech and actions. If he called on Vargo, it signaled a dire situation. Downing the last of his coffee, Vargo retrieved his hat from the neighboring chair. "You know me, always ready to lend a hand, Brogan. The car's outside, and you'll be riding in the back," Brogan grumbled, his face reddening. Exiting the cafe, the trio embarked toward the segregated district, a haven for immigrants. Divided by nationality, Oriental, Irish, Italian, the area housed struggling families fighting to secure their sustenance. It was a designated enclosure, a prison without walls, where the marginalized toiled for survival. The air carried the scent of scorched cabbage and greasy laundry soap, and children with dirty faces roamed the streets, their hunger apparent. "How do people endure this?" Ed Barris, the young detective, questioned. "First week on the job, kid?" Vargo asked. "How did you know?" "And it's Ed Barris." "Two reasons, Ed. First, Brogan's partners don't last longer than a week. They either meet an untimely end or quit." Ed cast an anxious glance at Brogan. "Is that true?" Brogan's expression remained impassive as his grip on the steering wheel tightened. "And secondly, you're demonstrating textbook idiocy." In a swift motion, Ed whirled in his seat, gripping Vargo's collar with blazing fury in his eyes. Brogan slammed on the brakes, thrusting Ed back into his seat before addressing Vargo. "Zip it, Vargo. The chief wants you there, but he didn't specify whether you should arrive in one piece." Vargo merely grinned as the car resumed its journey. Silence reigned until they reached a 5-story brick building stretching the length of a block. Many windows were ajar, sheets fluttering in the breeze, and grubby children pressed their faces against the sedan's windows. "Move along, you rascals!" Brogan bellowed as he stepped out of the car. A uniformed officer approached him from the building, and after a brief exchange, Brogan leaned through the door to convey the situation. "Here's the deal, Vargo. Upstairs, a man was murdered last night, his body eviscerated. We're here to get to the bottom of it." "Sounds straightforward. Why bring me in?" According to the officer, the man was gutted like a fish. The only witness was his child, who was not saying a word. No other witnesses and no feasible entry or exit from the room. That's where you come in. Apparently, the child had been complaining about monsters in the room for some time. What's odd about that? Many kids imagine they see monsters at night. Yeah, well, this particular imaginary monster left claw marks on the wall. "Sounds right up my alley," Vargo commented, exiting the back seat. "Let's get to it." The journey led them to the 5th-floor apartment, where several uniformed officers were stationed outside the door. Vargo turned to Brogan with a serious expression on his face. "Brogan, let me go in first. If there's something inside, I don't need your menacing presence to spook it." "Push too hard, Vargo, and they'll send me to find some other nut to talk to your ghost," Brogan retorted angrily. Vargo stepped cautiously into the apartment, his senses acutely attuned to the environment. He knew from experience that he could often discern the presence of the other side almost immediately. It was astonishing how many wandering souls were adrift, lost between realms. They haunted hallways, loitered in kitchens, strolled along sidewalks, and sometimes even occupied bathrooms, their expressions a mixture of bewilderment and unawareness of their own demise. With a deep breath, Vargo closed his eyes attempting to establish a connection, but an eerie silence greeted him, devoid even of the usual telltale chill that signaled the ethereal. After minutes that seemed to stretch indefinitely, he retraced his steps to the hallway where Brogan was waiting. His expression was a mixture of disappointment and concern as he shook his head at Brogan. "I'm not picking up on anything," Vargo admitted with a furrowed brow. "What the hell does that mean?" Brogan's frustration was palpable. "I'm not entirely sure. Given the circumstances you described, there should be some traces, some connection. But it's like there's nothing there," Vargo replied, a hint of confusion in his voice. He turned his gaze back towards the closed apartment door, his thoughts mulling over the peculiar situation. "Where's the mother and the boy?" he inquired. "They're down the hall at a neighbor's place," one of the uniformed officers answered. "Allow me to talk to them. Maybe my presence can help shed some light on this, although I can't promise anything," Vargo requested, sensing that perhaps direct interaction with the affected individuals might yield more insights. Brogan warned, "All right, Vargo, but I've got my eyes on you, so mind your manners." The neighbor's apartment welcomed them with subdued lighting and a tense atmosphere. Two women were seated on the couch, their emotions raw and apparent. One of them, with reddish hair haphazardly tied into a loose bun, was quietly weeping while the other offered comfort. Brogan removed his hat, an uncharacteristic display of gentleness, as he approached the distressed pair. "Mrs. Riley, I am Detective Sergeant Brogan, and this is Rick Vargo. He's assisting with the investigation and has a few questions for you." Brogan introduced them. Sarah Riley, her face swollen and marked by tears, attempted to regain some composure as she wiped her cheeks. Her attempts to tidy her hair were futile, revealing the exhaustion and anguish etched onto her features from the long night. "I suppose it's fine," she replied in a hoarse whisper. "Mrs. Riley, did you or your husband notice any unusual occurrences in the apartment? Sounds, movements, anything out of the ordinary?" Vargo inquired gently. Sarah's expression shifted from confusion to frustration. "What kind of question is that?" "No, there was nothing like that. Just the awful tragedy we woke up to." Vargo pressed on, his focus on understanding their recent history. "How long have you been living there?" "We moved in shortly after getting married, just about a month ago," she answered. "Ben's father, was he your late husband?" Vargo inquired delicately. Sarah's face tightened with grief. "Yes, he passed away nearly 2 years ago while working in the mill," Vargo continued, trying to piece together the complex situation. "Tell me about your new husband. What kind of man was he?" "He was a good man, a fine man. He took us in when no one else would. Sure, he had his moments of temper, but life's been tough. He loved us, and now he's gone," Sarah replied, with a mixture of sadness and defensiveness. The weight of her newfound predicament seemed to bear down on her as she continued. "What are we supposed to do now? No money? No man to take care of us. How are we going to survive?" As if on cue, a small voice piped up from another room. "Mommy!" A young boy hurried into the living room, seeking his mother's embrace. At that moment, as he rushed by, an unexpected gust of frigid air engulfed Vargo, as if unseen fingers had momentarily clutched his heart. A sharp, piercing sensation coursed through his chest, and he staggered back, caught off guard. The sensation was almost tangible, as though some force had breached the barrier between worlds. He glanced at the young boy, who had nestled against his mother's back, and cautiously extended his hand towards him. To his shock, the instant his skin brushed against the child, he felt a searing pain and warmth spread from his palm. Suppressing his instinctive reaction, He swiftly withdrew his hand, hastily concealing it within the folds of his coat, his palm now marked by a slow trickle of blood. "Brogan, I need to talk to the boy alone," Vargo declared. The expression on his face gave Brogan a clear indication that something was amiss. "Fine. Take him to the other room," Brogan consented, sensing an urgency in Vargo's demeanor. "No, I think it would be better if everyone went out into the hallway," Vargo insisted, his voice firm. Brogan's skepticism was short-lived, as Vargo opened his coat slightly, revealing his bloodied hand. A mix of surprise and concern washed over Brogan's face. "Take the others out. Leave the boy with me," Vargo instructed with conviction. Momentarily taken aback, Brogan quickly regained his composure, adjusting his hat and approaching the two women. "Mrs. Riley, I need you and the young lady to come with me." Mrs. Riley's concern was evident. "What about Ben?" "Please, Mrs. Riley, trust me," Vargo reassured her calmly. "Ben will be safe." She held her son close for a moment, then reluctantly followed Brogan to the outer hallway. Meanwhile, Vargo knelt down in front of the small boy, who had curled tightly into the couch, his fear palpable. "Ben, I promise I won't harm you." Vargo's soothing words met the boy's frightened gaze. "You can trust me. I'm here to help you, to ensure that you never have to face the monster again." "You believe me?" Ben's voice trembled with a mix of vulnerability and hope. "Yes, I believe you," Vargo affirmed gently. "Now, can you tell me about Carl?" "He's mean," Ben began, and Vargo noticed the air around the boy starting to pulse faintly. "He tried to hurt me." "How did he hurt you?" Vargo inquired softly, his attention fully on the boy. "He grabbed me and hit me." As Ben recounted the incidents, the air's pulses grew in intensity, radiating a reddish hue as his voice carried an undertone of anger. "He called me names." Ben's voice began to shift, taking on a deeper, graver quality. "And he told me he would—" "What did he say he would do?" Vargo probed gently, sensing a shift in the atmosphere. "He said he would kill me." Ben's voice surged, his emotions becoming overwhelming. In an instant, the young boy's form contorted, and a creature of darkness sprang forth from him with a snarl. Vargo managed to barely evade the monstrous claw that swiped through the air dangerously close to his face. Rolling away, he quickly regained his footing, his gaze locked onto the creature that now occupied the space between him and the boy, its snarls echoing in the room. "Ben, I'm not here to hurt you," Vargo stammered as he began to back away slowly, his eyes never leaving the menacing creature. You must stop this." "But I'm not doing anything," the boy cried out, his voice quivering as the beast growled fiercely, its fangs dripping with drool. "Yes, you are, Ben," Vargo responded urgently. "You created this monster, and you have the power to stop it." "No, I won't let anyone hurt me again," the boy's voice wavered with a mix of fear and determination. "I understand that you're frightened and angry, but you have to trust me," Vargo implored. "That's what the others said," Ben retorted, his desperation evident in his voice. "Ben, what do you think your father would say if he knew about this?" Vargo's words were gentle, intended to reach the boy's wounded soul. "My father is gone." Ben's voice cracked with raw emotion. The creature began to move forward, its massive form emanating a sense of impending danger. "He's gone because I'm bad. I'm very bad." With a sudden leap, the beast soared through the air, knocking Vargo off his feet. He struggled to grab hold of the creature as it lifted him and flung him across the room. Pain seared through his body, his clothes torn, and blood oozed from deep wounds beneath. Gasping for breath, Vargo tried to rise, his vision blurred by the pain. The creature advanced with each heavy footstep, the floor quaking beneath its weight as it snarled ferociously. "Vargo, are you okay? What's happening in there?" Brogan's voice echoed from the hallway. "The door's jammed. I can't get in." "Stay out, Brogan," Vargo managed to rasp out, his voice strained. The monstrous entity seized his torn coat and hurled him violently against the wall. Darkness threatened to overtake him as he fought to remain conscious, struggling to focus amidst the chaos. The beast poised itself to strike again, its looming presence overwhelming. Abruptly, the apartment door splintered and burst open with a crash as Brogan burst inside, gun drawn and ready. "No!" screamed Ben, his voice piercing the air with a desperate wail that echoed through the room. "My God!" Brogan's exclamation was barely a whisper, his eyes wide with disbelief and horror. Vargo turned to Brogan, noticing the detective's face draining of color, his body going slack with shock as he took in the unbelievable scene unfolding before them. The grip on Brogan's pistol slackened, his fingers trembling as the sight seemed to chill him to his very soul. The monstrous creature's wild snarls filled the room, reverberating in the air like a primal warning. "What the hell is that?" Brogan's voice cracked, a mix of fear and disbelief, as he instinctively tightened his grip on the pistol once more, his knuckles turning white. In a sudden burst of movement, the creature sprang into action, leaping through the air and landing with a thud beside the terrified boy. Before Vargo could react, the creature enveloped Ben in its maw and crashed through the nearest window, shattering the glass into a cascade of shards. Vargo's heart raced as he ignored the searing pain that shot through his body. He propelled himself toward the broken window, his limbs moving on pure instinct. As Vargo reached the window, he could see the creature's massive form in the distance, Ben's terrified screams echoing through the chaos. The creature ran down the street like a force of nature, leaving destruction in its wake. Pedestrians scattered, carts were overturned, and cars came to a halt, as if the very world itself had been upended. "Vargo." Brogan's voice was a stuttered whisper, his eyes wide with disbelief and shock, still struggling to process the impossible reality that had unfolded before him. "There's no time to explain, Brogan. We have to save Ben," Vargo shouted, already racing toward the hallway. He heard Brogan barking orders behind him as he stumbled down the stairs and burst out into the street. The scene outside was a chaotic mess, a scene of panicked people and overturned objects. Brogan joined Vargo, his face a mixture of determination and fear as he stood by Vargo's side, ready to face the unknown together. "Which way?" Brogan's voice held a mix of urgency and frustration. Vargo swiftly pointed down the street, his expression grim. "Come on," he urged, his feet pounding against the pavement as he led the way. They rushed past scenes of mayhem, their senses assaulted by the cacophony of screams and the sight of chaos unfolding. Amid the turmoil, a lone infant's cries pierced through the air, drawing Brogan's attention. Without hesitation, he swooped down, plucking the baby from the ground. He handed the child to a bewildered bystander whose confusion mirrored the chaos around. As they rounded a corner, Vargo's sharp eyes caught sight of a tide of fleeing people racing towards them. He grabbed a man who was rushing past, his grip firm but not aggressive. "Which way did it go?" Vargo asked with a sense of urgency. The man, wide-eyed and trembling, pointed shakily toward an alley across the street. Reacting instinctively, Brogan drew his pistol, ready to face whatever awaited them. "Come on, Vargo. Let's move," Brogan urged impatiently, taking a step forward. However, Vargo halted him with a determined grip on his arm. "Wait a minute." Vargo's tone was resolute, causing Brogan to pause and look at him quizzically. Wait! Wait for what? Brogan's frustration tinged his words as he shrugged off Vargo's grip. We can't afford to wait. We need to take that thing down. That thing is Ben, Vargo stated, his voice carrying an air of certainty. Brogan's disbelief was plain on his face. What the hell are you talking about? I saw that thing eat that boy back in the apartment. In my line of work, appearances can often deceive, Vargo responded coolly. That creature emerged from Ben. It's his manifestation when he feels cornered or threatened. Brogan looked at Vargo with a confused expression. He was a man of action, a blunt instrument that, when faced with a wall, his first instinct was to break through it. So, how do we stop it without causing harm to the kid? He asked. Vargo shook his head. I don't have all the answers, but we can't just charge in there guns blazing. Vargo's hand gently lowered the barrel of Brogan's gun. Understood? Brogan's internal conflict was evident as he shook his head. I don't know. You haven't exactly been batting 1,000 so far. He holstered his gun with a resigned sigh. Fine. We'll follow your plan, Vargo. But if things go south, I won't hesitate to do whatever's necessary. One way or another, that creature doesn't leave this street. You got that? Yeah, I understand. As the tension hung heavy in the air, Brogan and Vargo cautiously advanced toward the alley. They pressed against the grimy brick wall, and Vargo cautiously peered around the corner. There was a moment of eerie silence, but then a faint whimper reached his ears. Brogan, stay put, Vargo ordered softly, his eyes never leaving the shadows ahead. However, before Vargo could take another step, Brogan's hand shot out, gripping Vargo's collar and forcefully pulling him back. Have you completely lost your ever-loving mind? Brogan's voice held a mixture of disbelief and exasperation. Trust me, I know what I'm doing, Vargo said with conviction, shrugging away from Brogan's grip. Brogan's suspicion lingered in his gaze. Really? Vargo offered a wry half-smile. Well, not really. I have no clue what the hell I'm doing, but at the moment, I'm all you've got. That's not exactly reassuring, Brogan retorted, shaking his head in disbelief. Vargo adopted a slightly more serious tone. Look, just stay here. If I end up getting myself killed, you can regale everyone with stories about my stunning stupidity at my funeral. Brogan's lips twitched into a reluctant grin. Deal. But, hey Vargo, take care of yourself. Yeah, Vargo replied before stepping into the alley, the faint whimper resonating in his ears. Ben? He called softly, his voice echoing off the grimy walls. Ben? Are you all right? Help me, came Ben's plaintive cry. Ben, I know you're scared and confused, but it's all right. You're not in trouble, okay? Vargo pressed on, inching further into the alley. Ben, I promise I won't hurt you. I'm here to help. I don't mean to be bad. Ben's voice held a touch of sadness. Mommy tells me to stop being bad, so that those men can take care of us. You're not bad, Ben. You're just different. Vargo reassured him, edging closer to where he sensed Ben's presence near some trash cans. It's okay to be different. It doesn't make you bad. It makes you special. Special? Ben's voice carried a hint of hope. My daddy used to call me his special little guy. He did? Yeah, but he's gone now. Anger tainted Ben's voice. Mommy said it was my fault. The anger turned into a growl. She said I was bad, and he left. Vargo sensed the urgency, realizing that he needed to break through to Ben before the creature re-emerged. He knew Brogan's resolve to act if things turned sour. Go away, Ben's plea was tinged with desperation. "Don't come any closer." "I can help you," Vargo implored gently. "Let me—" "I said go away!" The creature erupted from Ben in a flurry of motion, its eyes glowing in the darkness as it gripped the ground with clawed hands. Vargo understood he had mere moments before it lunged. "Ben!" A woman's voice sliced through the tension. It was Ben's mother. "Ben, please stop. It wasn't your fault. It was mine. All mine." The creature halted, its snarling muzzle turning towards the source of the voice. Mommy? Ben's voice wavered. "I don't know. I don't understand." "It was me," she confessed, stepping past Vargo towards her son. "I was the one who was bad. Your daddy left because of me, not you." Brogan, who had caught up, called out, "Wait! Stop!" The beast emitted an otherworldly roar as it crouched in preparation to spring. Brogan drew his pistol, firing 2 shots before Vargo could react. The shots echoed through the alley, and in the aftermath, Vargo dashed forward with Brogan close behind. At the alley's end, they found Ben cradling his mother. Vargo's heart sank as he saw her bleeding from the chest, struggling to breathe amid the gathering blood. She managed a weak smile, her trembling hand caressing Ben's face, even as life slipped away. "You're a good boy, Ben," she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of a mother's love. The words seemed to linger in the air, fragile and precious. "You've always been a good boy." In the aftermath of her utterance, her body convulsed with a final gasp, a shudder that marked the passing of her spirit. Her hand, once a source of comfort, slowly slid away from Ben's cheek, leaving a trail of warmth behind. Her gaze, once filled with life, dimmed into an empty stare as the light within her had extinguished. Ben held on to her desperately, his small frame trembling with the intensity of his emotions. Tears flowed unchecked down his cheeks, mixing with the rain that had begun to fall around them. His voice wavered as he attempted to voice his confusion and pain. "But, Mommy, I don't—" His gaze lifted, locking onto Vargo's just as a group of policemen made their way down the alley. "Ed, take the boy to my car," Brogan directed, his tone gruff yet compassionate. "I'll call it in." Shadows of Remorse. Part 3. Time crawled as they waited. An hour passed before a medical wagon arrived to carry away Ben's mother, leaving behind a street that resembled a war-torn zone. Vargo felt the weight of exhaustion and pain as if he had journeyed through a nightmarish ordeal. He sank onto a nearby crate, catching his breath, when Brogan approached. "You know, I did what I thought I had to do," Brogan admitted, his gaze fixed on the ground. "Yeah, I know," Vargo responded. "But still." "Well, at least the boy will get some help now," Brogan mused, his foot absently kicking a rock that bounced off the curb. "I just hope they can help him manage his anger," Vargo added, attempting to rise, only to be met with the protest of his weakened legs. Brogan was quick to steady him before he tumbled to the ground. "I guess I'd better get you to a doctor before you decide to check out on me," Brogan said, a wry grin playing on his lips. Vargo was on the brink of protesting, but the agony coursing through him convinced him otherwise. "Fine. One more thing, Vargo." "Yeah." "I was right there, saw almost everything, yet I can't wrap my head around what happened. What's the whole story?" Vargo exhaled softly. "I'll fill you in, but only if you do me a favor." "Sure, what's that?" "Could you swing by a bar on our way to the hospital? I could really use a drink." Brogan chuckled. "Yeah, I think I'll join you." "Inviting me for a date, Brogan?" "I didn't know you liked me that much." Brogan's grin widened. "You're a real smart-ass, Vargo. a genuine 100-proof smartass. Thank you for joining us for Shadow of Remorse, a gripping tale from the Skull Hunter book series. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more thrilling adventures coming your way. Until next time, stay safe, and may your dreams be filled with light and wonder.